Yes, absolutely, folks. Kia ora, Joseph Kursky here. Greetings and salutations. Speaking to you from 40 degrees north latitude, 105 west longitude. You can look that up on a map. Mapping is all about what we're going to be talking about right now. In fact, the where question, the whys of where, and how you might use some of these whys of where tools, geotechnologies, in your science instruction. I salute you all at the SciCon conference. You're some of my favorite people on the whole planet. I've been to the conference once before, and I love the community there. So let's keep in touch, okay? It's not just this session for the next 3 hours. Just kidding. We don't have 3 hours together. Just wanted to make sure you folks are on your toes. For the short time that we have together, I'd like this to be just a starting point for a future dialogue. So I've got my contact information that I'll share. I also have a story map. We'll talk about what a story map is, a multimedia web map that is going to be my vehicle for teaching the concepts and the skills. So I'm basically trying to practice what I'm preaching here. I'm using one of the geotechnology tools to actually talk about and support you all in your use of geotechnologies in the classroom. So that said, let's chat about why where matters in science education and also in science. Why use location as a framework for study, for example? Everything has a where component. All the major science issues of our time, climate, natural hazards, energy, water, all the UN SDGs, right? The Sustainable Development Goals. They all have a where component. They all take place somewhere, and they also change over space and time. Hence, geotechnologies is a very important tool in science, but also in science education. I would just make the argument that you are doing many things here when you're teaching with geotechnologies, and we'll unpack what that means in a moment. But you're fostering critical thinking, spatial thinking, problem-based learning, inquiry, all the things that you and I love as educators. That's why we became educators in the first place, right? We want students to actually engage in real-world issues in real places with tools that are actually being used in the professional world. So there's lots of other reasons that I'll go into as well, but those are the primary reasons if you don't remember anything else from this presentation. So what are maps? Maps are representations of reality. They are very interesting representations. They give us a lot of information in a short amount of space, don't they? Whether it was in the past on wood blocks or clay tablets, the Babylonian clay tablets, the Al-Idrisi's map on 2 plates of silver from the 1100s in Tunisia and Sicily, that would have been a heavy map, right? And a hard map to fold. And in our 100 years before today, maps were basically reproduced on paper, right, for a long period of time, for at least several hundred years. But especially in the 20th century, as people started to use maps as analytical tools, maps were produced en masse. And then in our own century, the 21st century, maps are all around us in digital form. They're very useful representations of reality, but they are representations nonetheless. They have distortions. For example, we're trying to portray the complex three-dimensional Earth onto a two-dimensional map or a 3D scene on our computer. So we have map projection issues. We have what to take out, generalization issues. We have other representational issues, how to symbolize, how to classify the data on maps. And all of these, I believe, provide excellent teaching moments for you in the classroom, excellent moments of inquiry. Geospatial technologies are one of the few tools where you can say, well, what if we looked at this variable instead of that variable? Or what if we looked at, instead of Hamilton, let's look at Auckland and look at the same variables over there, or Tauranga, et cetera. It's one of those few tools where you could ask the what if questions, and you've got the data at your fingertips, and you could explore those what if questions and uncover, well, was that hypothesis that you just postulated, is it valid or not? So geotechnologies, remote sensing, looking at the world from space, or UAVs, drones, satellite imagery, aircraft, and also geographic information systems, looking at the world as a series of layers, landforms, land use, population density, natural hazards, etc., breaking apart the world into a series of layers. Now, you're all sort of backlit by a window, so I can't tell if you're texting Paul saying, this is torture, Joseph. This is the most boring thing ever. Hopefully you're like, oh, okay, tell me more. So, for example, this is a tessellation that you can make. You can band the world into a series of hexagons or cubes and try to uncover patterns of relationships and trends. That's what drives us forward as science educators, right? I would also argue that these tools can be used to give you and your students superpowers, and also to bridge any sort of disciplinary boundaries that may exist between science, social studies, or social sciences, language arts, and other disciplines. Ooh, more about that in a bit. So maps are tied to real locations, real data, and real issues. Now more than ever, maps are needed in a digital form to help us to make smart decisions to build more resilient, healthier, happier communities. That's what we all want, right, folks? So I would just contend also that you folks are leaders, and using geotechnologies in the classroom is a way for you to show some leadership here, and also to help your colleagues understand why and when it's appropriate and how it's appropriate. The reason why I say when it's appropriate is because sometimes people know I work for Esri, the mapping company. We're a bunch of geospatial geeks. We love geospatial technology, and we want to see it used in all levels of society, including education. Now, you may wonder, well, Joseph, I'm getting barraged as a teacher with use this tool, use that tool from all kinds of companies and all kinds of organizations. Should you use every one of those tools? No. Can you use every one of those tools? No. But geotechnologies is not going away for some of the reasons why I described in the last few moments, that we're always going to be grappling with some of these key 21st century issues of our time. And so geotechnologies is not going to be some niche thing that's going to go away or fade away into the sunset, if you know what I mean. It's always going to be here, and it's a way for you to also show leadership in the classroom. Now, I won't bore you with my own background, but you may wonder, well, who's Joseph, and why is he speaking to me from Colorado, USA? I love New Zealand. I've been there 6 or 7 times in the past. I love the community, and I love to keep the dialogue going. But my background is in science, STEM, education, geography, and I worked for big, federal mapping sciencey agencies like the U.S. Geological Survey, the Census Bureau, which is like your New Zealand statistical agency. And I also, like you, I love to teach. So I teach teacher professional development workshops, and also as an adjunct in several different universities. I've also been involved with nonprofit organizations like the National Council for Geographic Education and others. So I love the world of education and science and the intersection thereof. So I'd love to keep in touch with you. And there's lots of ways to get a hold of me. So I'm on LinkedIn, etc. Let me ask you this, kind of a deep question for me. It's Saturday evening, okay? And I can't think of anything cooler to do on a weekend than hang out with you teachers. I'm serious. And for you, it's Sunday sometime, right? So the point is, what do you care about? What drives you forward as an educator? What motivates you to get up every day and work with these fine students, a couple of whom I met at the beginning of the session here. So kudos to you students for doing this as well. Yeah, you're going to be leaders as well. You probably already are in your school. What do you want to see in society? Geotechnologies, it's not just a great career path for students. If they become a wildlife biologist or a city planner or a health official or a social worker, they're going to be asked, hey, can you develop a web mapping application that does this? Oh, yeah, I know how to do that. So it's a great career path. But more importantly, even than that, it is a way for us to use technology for good, to use technology to build a better world. And that's exactly what your local and regional government authority is doing, what your nonprofit agencies are doing in New Zealand and beyond. They're using these same tools to build more resilience. Now, we've had lots of challenges over the last few years, right? We feel empowered by technologies and methods and the community that we're in, but we also feel kind of challenged, not just with COVID, but natural hazards of various kinds and other things that we're dealing with in society, right? And geospatial technology is a way for us to put a stake in the ground and say, we will make a positive difference on the planet. Now, one of the things that I've laid out a moment ago is that GIS and spatial thinking is fundamental to all sciences, earth science, biological sciences, life sciences, etc., because all of these issues are 21st century spatial issues. And there is a website, GIS for Science, that you might want to take a look at some point. It's all about, I think, some very good case studies for you to lay out before students about, hey, look, people are looking at coastal erosion and species extinction and sustainable energy and so on and so forth, but they're using geospatial technology to do that. So it's a nice set of case studies as well. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that It's a nice way to get female students into geospatial technologies. We've got 3 volumes of Women in GIS, Geospatial Technologies. And so it's a series of stories about champions all around the world and nonprofit government agencies, private companies, et cetera, making a positive difference. So our chief scientist, for example, is Deep Sea Dawn Wright. And she is one of my heroes, but she is an oceanographer, geographer. She also goes deep, hence her nickname. She went to the Marianas Trench this past summer as on one of her dives, studying some stuff on the ocean floor. So why does Esri have a chief scientist? Why do we have science as a fundamental part of our organization? Well, just like your local government authority and agency, nonprofits, et cetera, we believe that these tools can help us to anchor science in the where question. So just a couple of good examples there. GIS is also a disruptive technology. Again, in education, it helps break down some of these barriers that we've set up over the last 100 years in education. So you as a science educator, there's going to be some linkages for you to work with the social studies educator, the geographer, the historian on your campus. So that's a good thing, considering multiple factors in education. And this story map has a couple of examples that I don't have time to actually get into right now. But in brief, before we get into some of the actual tools and what could I do with this, Joseph? Problem solving, critical thinking, using technology for good, the career pathway angle that I mentioned, and also spatial thinking. And it's holistic thinking too, getting students to think about, the atmosphere is connected to the lithosphere, is connected to the hydrosphere, is connected to the biosphere, is connected to the anthroposphere, right? The 8 billion humans shaping the planet. So all those things are connected, inspiring students to think holistically about the planet. So in their future workplace, they'll be thinking, ooh, if I alter a variable over here, it's going to alter a variable over here. So I need to think holistically. Now, for you students out there, it's good that you specialize. It's good that you go into chemistry or biology or within chemistry. Is it soil chemistry? Is it water chemistry? What are you going to look at? Atmosphere. It's good to specialize, but don't lose the holistic view of solving problems, which is so desperately needed on our planet, in my opinion. So let's look at 6 investigations with geotechnologies. Again, I've got all these in the same story map that you have there in the chat box. And since you're kind of distant from an actual computer, I think Paul and Simon can share these with you all. All y'all, ustedes, vous, tú, okay? You all good people. But one of them is a series of web mapping applications. No login required to anything. Web mapping applications, any device, anytime, anywhere. So the students could have tablets, they could have laptops, or you as the instructor could show these in an inquiry mode and investigate, posing questions as you go with one computer and one projector. So lots of different ways that you can teach this. And since these tools are all online, you can use this in a web course, you could use it in a hybrid mode, or you can use it face-to-face. So lots of different options for you as instructors. I'm going to on the oceans theme, since we started with that, I'm going to look at the Ecological Marine Unit Explorer. Now, in the past, we had oceans mapped as basically gray, green, or blue expanses, right? And then 20 or maybe a generation or two ago, we started having the ability to look at a base map that was the actual ocean floor. Okay, so we've got some relief there happening on the ocean floor. And now what we can do is we can say, you know what, this ecological marine units layer, I'm going to, as you can see, I'm scrolling down to your part of the world. And if I scroll down there or anywhere, I've got a 10-kilometer spacing. And this might appeal to you students that just told me before the session today that you're actually interested in chemistry. At each of the 10-kilometer spacings, I've got 6 variables. Oh my gosh, the data that you got at your fingertips. So, okay, I've got the temperature. Look at the temperature gradient here, just a little bit southeast of where you are right now. Okay, interesting. I've got the salinity, dissolved oxygen, et cetera. If this was part of your unit on ocean chemistry, or what is dissolved oxygen, and why do cold waters hold more dissolved oxygen than warm waters? Hey, class, remember what we talked about yesterday? This could be a nice supplement, as well as if I scroll to the south, my hypothesis, remember we talked about, I'm going to talk about a hypothesis in a bit. And if I click on an area just, a couple hundred kilometers south of New Zealand, the temperature is, my hypothesis is the temperature is going to be vastly lower, and it is. Okay, I'm going to get into some really cold waters, but look at the interesting place where I clicked on right now. Just as a certain depth, it actually gets warmer before it drops off again. Why is that? So we could talk about the whys of where, but isn't this fascinating that you've got this at your fingertips, folks? 10 kilometers all around the world, and there's metadata that talks about where this layer came from and so on. Interesting. So that's just one of a series of tools that we'll explore together today. Another one is the Wayback Imagery. This is all part of my organization hosts this thing called the Living Atlas of the World. Ooh, the Living Atlas of the World. It implies two things. A, that the content is actually living. In other words, it gets data from the Internet of Things feeds, stream gauging stations, earthquake epicenters, traffic, wildfire perimeters, etc. So another tool in there is called the Wayback Imagery. Okay, so if I look at the Wayback Imagery, I can see, I've got a swipe tool here, and I can look at things like urban sprawl. In this case, the default map position is actually Las Vegas, Nevada. Thank you very much, Priscilla. That was my Elvis impression. But anyway, the point is, with one or two clicks, this is why maps are so powerful. Look at this. I've got what's wrong with this picture. On the left side, I'm going to pull up 2014. On the right side, I'm going to pull up 2022. Okay, at a certain point, look at this right in the middle where my swipe tool is. Maybe you can't see that from the back of the room, but it was an island in 2014. In 2022, it's a peninsula connected to the land. So if arid and semi-arid cities are getting their water from surface water because they don't have enough groundwater to mine or pump, what's wrong with this picture? What's where? Why is it there? And why should we? What's where? Why is it there? And why should we care? Thank you. What's where? Why is it there? Why should we care about water, surface water? Okay, well, I've got the same tool. With the same tool, I could look at coastal erosion. I could look at glacial retreat. I could look at agricultural expansion in Texas, USA, or Saudi Arabia, or anywhere else around the world. Okay, so here I can even look at changes in my local community. Okay, so with the same tool, I'm going to go to your part of the world, and I'm going to look really tight here at a certain part of the city. Okay, so right now I can see just to the southeast of this race course, look, there's a whole development there now, whereas in 2014, it was a field. Interesting. Okay, so I can see changes at the local to global level with one tool. You've got literally terabytes of satellite imagery at your fingertips. I wish I could get excited about this. Anyway, the point is, you've got a lot right here. And that's level one. Level two, you can say, okay, I want to save that map now and bring it into the broader platform, which is called ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Online. The broader platform is, what would it allow me to do that I can't do right here? Well, it would allow you to save your maps. It would allow you to add other data in there. Land cover, land use, population density, mean annual precipitation. Because when you and I look at Las Vegas or the middle of Saudi Arabia or the UAE where I met Paul, we know we have this sort of framework in our minds that, okay, low precipitation. But let's say I'm 12 years old. I don't know that. So maybe I add mean annual precipitation to this layer and then say, okay, students, what's the mean annual precipitation? And therefore, why is this a concern? You've got this big city in the middle of a place that gets very little rainfall. What's where? Why is it there? And why should we care? So that is the Wayback Imagery. And that's another tool that you've got at your fingertips. I also have I know you folks are a lot of you are earth science and you love this kind of stuff. This is an example of a story map, the one that I've been showing right here, this sort of whys we've been stepping through. But here's another one I built just as a proof of concept for teaching about a certain topic in science. So I love landforms and geomorphology. I mean, what's not to love, right? Okay, well, here's an example of you could use this to teach about different landforms. I even have a little quiz here on the left side. What is this? A Piedmont, a alluvial fan, or a landslide? Okay, we'll talk about what that is, right? What about over here? So I click on here, and there's a series of map actions that I've built into the story map. So now I've scrolled over to a different place, and this is a tombolo. Okay, and then let's go over to this place right here. Let's go to this location. Oh, okay. Location number 4. Okay. Well, let's go over there. Let's go over to this location. So if I keep scrolling around on the map, I'm seeing different features on the landscape, and I can use that as an interactive Now, I used to work at U.S. Geological Survey, so I love topographic maps. I used to carry around a big roll, literally, of topographic maps, and I would teach landforms and land use with those. I still love topographic maps. Let me just have a moment. But you've got at your fingertips a dynamic, right? Zoomable, pannable. I can investigate. I don't have to take that physical roll of maps with me or pull them down from the wall. I actually have this content at multiple scales at my fingertips. And here, as you can see, I also have, if I scroll down to a different point on my, now I've got 3D scenes. So in this particular case, this is one of my favorite lessons because it's one of my favorite landscapes. Point Reyes in California, just on the other side of the Pacific from you all, right? This is where the San Andreas rolls out into the Pacific Ocean. So when the students ask, hey, is California going to split off, or a certain part of New Zealand going to split off into the Pacific? This is the map tool that I use. Okay, well, it's not going to split off per se, but the area around the fault, in this case, around the plate boundary, is sinking. And so you've got the seacoast, the water has encroached. So you've got this rift zone, and this part on the west side here is the Pacific plate, and this part over on the east side is the North American plate. And so you've got this amazing landscape. Fortunately, it's part of a protected seacoast, but here is the example that I actually use to reinforce that concept. You see what I mean? It's not just about the maps. It's the underlying concept. It's the more important goal that you have in your lesson. What's your objective, and how can these tools help you enhance what you're teaching? Now, nothing against textbooks. They have their place. I've written several of them myself. But what I'm getting at here is that you're not confined to a map that's on this, page 250 of your textbook that's this big on ocean currents or plate boundaries, right? You've got this at your fingertips. And maybe that map was from 1975. Nothing against the Bee Gees and Peter Frampton. They were bands, okay? They were bands. The point is, you've got this dynamic content at your fingertips. Okay, so I'm hoping that this kind of getting you excited. That's just one story map that I created on landforms. You and your students could also create these multimedia story maps for assessment, for students presenting a concept, for you to use as the part of the student's professional portfolio as they go through your schools and go into the higher education system and go into the workplace. Yeah, lots of ways you can use this. So these story maps are dynamic. And do I still use Prezi? Do I use PowerPoint? Do I still use videos to present? Sure, I do. I use the most appropriate tool for the job. And that's what I'm encouraging you to do. For certain things, a story map really might be the way to go. Just like when I'm talking about geotechnologies here, for certain lessons, plate tectonics, ocean currents, population change, et cetera, all the other things that you're teaching, or several of the other things that you're teaching, this might be a very appropriate tool for you. Not in every case. So one of the messages that I hope you're going to take away from this is that Joseph's not advocating, Paul, Simon, Joseph, they're not advocating that we use geotechnology in every single lesson. Where it's appropriate, for example, where your existing resources are insufficient, where you're not getting as much student engagement, where you're, the list could go on, right? Where there's something that's you don't like as well in your current set of instructional methods or your current resources. Those are the ways, those are the low-hanging fruits to say, I'm going to use geotechnologies in this case to help me teach these concepts and to foster the skills that Joseph was talking about. There are no shortages of resources on the Climate Hub as well. And I'm, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip over a few of these things because that could be a whole webinar right there on the Climate Hub. The indicators of planet Earth, though, I'm going to spend 60 seconds on these. This is again, you probably can't see the URLs that I'm showing here, but it's all arcgis.com. It's the platform that you have at your fingertips with data, with tools, with a community, with lessons, with guidance. It's a whole platform. So here is one aspect of the platform. It's called the Living Atlas Indicators of Planet Earth. So in each one of these, you've got a little tile. This is sort of like, to me, the nervous system of your body. It regulates all your vital organs, right? Without which we wouldn't be having this conversation. This is sort of the indicator. This is like the nervous system for planet Earth. So each one of these little tiles is something you could highlight each week in the semester. Okay, class, we're going to investigate drought on this Monday morning. And the next Monday morning, it could be, coral bleaching. etc., if it's appropriate to your curriculum. I'm just going to explore one of these tiles. Each one of these tiles has case studies, a live interactive web map. You knew it was going to be a map, right? There's going to be a map in every single one of these. And it's going to give you a default location. In this case, the wildfires are in, as you can see here, okay, it's in Central South America. Some of them set, right? Some of these are for agriculture, for burning of vegetation and so on. So we can look at a little closer to home for you folks. Oh, okay. Now we see, gosh, there's something happening on the South Island. Okay, so what's going on there? So in other words, you've got a live sort of a heartbeat of planet Earth in every one of these tiles. And you can, as the semester goes on, another way to teach with this is, okay, students, this group over here, you take one of these little tiles and you report out on it in a 5-minute oral presentation. And you students over here, you take another one of these tiles. So in other words, you're not leading every single one of these discussions, right? You're encouraging the students to do that. So the Living Atlas indicators of planet Earth. And then another powerful thing is mapping and analyzing your own field data. Field data is near and dear to our hearts, right, folks? Let me have another moment. We love getting out in the field, don't we? That's actually how I met Paul. We were out in the mangroves in the UAE working with students. So field work is fundamental to why we became educators. I know there's lots of constraints in getting students out in the field, but even on your own campus, you can do things, as I'll explain here in a moment. But just to give you a sense of some of the power that you have at your fingertips. Now, I've got a certain kind of field data that I'm gathering here, and I want you to put on your educator hat for a moment saying, Joseph, this is an interesting data set, but I'm not interested in mapping in the case of what I'm mapping here. I'm mapping litter that I collected. Okay, maybe that's part of your environmental unit, maybe not. Maybe it's water quality, maybe it's noise, maybe it's tree species, maybe it's every animal that you count or identify in a park or in a riparian zone. But let me just show you what the power you've got. Once you've got this data inside ArcGIS Online, in this case, all I have to do is say, you know what, every single one of these litter locations, this is in a metropolitan area, obviously, is I've got a certain attribute. So the G part of GIS is the map. The I part is the table of data behind the map. So in this case, if I open the table, I'm going to see basically a spreadsheet. I've got 15 records in that table. So 15 places where I've gathered litter in this case. Okay, again, put your educator hat on. Think about, oh, this could be anything. Again, tree species, etc. Okay, but with this one tool, I can say, you know what? I want to change this so that I'm not just mapping the points where I collected data. I'm going to look at, well, where was the plastic? And when I map plastic, it's going to say, okay, in this location, I had 14 pieces of plastic, and that's why it shows up a lot bigger than over here where I had 2 pieces of plastic collected. Okay, so now I'm going to add every single one of these attributes. Okay, so I'm going to add that, and now it's going to say, I can't map all those as graduated circle. I'm going to map them as predominant. What type of litter is predominant there? Okay, so that's probably hard for you to see in the back of the room there, so I'm going to bump up the size. I've got full capabilities here to change any of these symbols that I want. So now, oh, that's still too small for those of you in the back. Let's bump that up a little bit. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to say done here and done. And wouldn't it be great to have a legend? So now I've got 2 things. I've got the type of litter, but I also have the darkness is the strength of the predominance there. So again, just thinking about, wow, the power that you have at your fingertips. Let's just go one level more because you're the New Zealand awesome science teachers, right? So let's go one level more. Let's say, ooh, charts and size. Now I've got a pie chart for each one of these. And again, what if this was tree species, tree condition, etc.? Okay, now I've got a pie chart giving me the number of pieces of litter and the type of litter. Let's go just one more. Let's just go one more level. Okay, let's go to this and say, I don't want pies. I want a donut or a ring map. Now I've got the ring indicates the type of litter and the size still indicates the amount of litter at each location. And then look at this grouping percentage here. Values below the grouping percentage are aggregated into other. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and aggregate that because it's still a lot of information, especially, let's say I'm 13 years old. That's kind of a lot of information there. Okay, but now I can see, oh, if I've made grouping up to 30% or so, now I can see that over here we've got an issue with plastic. Over here we've got an issue with glass. That's predominant in that point. So at your fingertips, again, with a couple of clicks, if I hadn't been talking so much, you do have a lot of power at your fingertips. Okay, Nice. All right. So that's a little bit of analyzing your own field data. And another thing that I wanted to indicate here is that, gosh, I wish I could get excited about this, but one of the things that I wanted to indicate here is a couple of things here. And number one is, remember, you've got a 3D scene viewer tied to real data. Okay, so right now I've got 30 days of earthquakes mapped. I've got them mapped in 2017. Do I have to be content with 2017? No, of course not. You know what? It would be really interesting, wouldn't it, to change that base map to an ocean space map. Okay. Now I can see. I've got an attribute for every one of these earthquakes. Oh my goodness. Okay, now I know the depth, the intensity, etc. What if I wanted to map the last 30 days from April 2023? Could I do that? Yes. This is just for illustration purposes, but you've got, again, ties to real-time or near real-time information at your fingertips that you could add to this. And okay, students, we were just looking at the earthquakes sadly, from February 2023 in Turkey and Syria. Let's take a look at those. Why were they so devastating? How many of them were there? Were there aftershocks? It's foreshocks, etc. So you've got a lot of information at your fingertips with with these tools. Okay, another thing, a couple of guidelines here as we sort of get to our final 7 minutes or so. First of all, don't stop at getting data onto a map. The map is a stepping stone to greater understanding. And number two, don't get too attached to the tools. Some of you teachers are probably too young to remember this, but I saw this in a secondary school where I was teaching an after-school geotech club. What is this? Anybody know out there in the classroom right now? It's an old Mac. Yeah, it's a doorstop now, but it was someone's valued part of their computer infrastructure in the not too distant past. The point I'm making here is the tools change, the tools evolve. You all are lifelong learners. The tools will evolve. This is the most important tool of all, right? Your brain and the brains of your students. Keep that nurtured. Keep them asking questions and moving forward. And geotechnologies can be a viable part of your inquiry. So I'm going to continue here in a moment with some resources to move forward. All three legs of the geoliteracy, what I call geoliteracy, matter. Content knowledge. So when we were using that ocean 10-kilometer spacing of the ocean chemistry, it's anchored in what is ocean chemistry? What is chemistry? What is dissolved oxygen? What is salinity? What is pH? So it's anchored in solid content. What is an earthquake? What are plate boundaries, right? So content is key. It's not just the navigating around on these web maps. The skills are important, and it's not just the geotechy skills. It's communicating, it's inquiry, it's the ability to ask questions, and then the geographic perspective, the whys of where. That applies to all aspects of science, social science, language arts, and more. Okay, that geographic perspective. So you need all three legs is what I'm getting at. Okay, now resources to move forward. One of the resources to move forward is as follows. Let's say you want to get into this some more. I work for ESRI, right? Environmental Systems Research Institute. We have international distributors that actually take our tools and work with folks in their regions, their countries. I'm more than happy to be a part of your network. My colleague, Claire Turlow at Eagle Technologies in New Zealand, she is got a very equivalent type of role that I do. We are both very passionate about sharing this with teachers, professors, students, and others, okay? So Eagle Technology is the way for you to say, hey, I've heard about these tools. Now, all the things that Joseph showed, I don't need a sign-in, I don't need a login. But at some point in the future, you're going to say, but I want my students to save those maps. I want them to share those maps with me, their instructor. I want them to create a presentation. And so to create, just like in Dropbox or Google Drive, you need an account. And the account for getting ArcGIS online in schools is free. And Claire at Eagle Technology can help you get there. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's one resource I wanted to make sure you knew about. Also, Eagle Technology has a whole series of lessons of, okay, I see that, Joseph. Now give me some lesson that I can start with and that the map is already attached to so I don't actually have to build any of these things. So, for example, one of the lessons that Claire put out there, working in conjunction with good teachers like yourselves, is, okay, here's a sea level rise modeling, tracking black bears. These are all regional or focused on real places in your wonderful country. So, for example, Claire's got a earthquakes. Look, it's a story map. Okay, what is look at this? You've got an interactive. Oh my gosh, you've got an interactive web map. Kind of looks familiar, doesn't it? Inside a story map, so you can actually use this as sort of a mini ebook to teach with. Look at that. Okay, why is there so many earthquakes right off of here, etc. So there are lessons tied to interactive web maps. And other lessons that you'll find on the Eagle site is, for example, this is one of my favorites: sinking carbon, changing land use. So inside here is a link to a really rich and deep data set that you're using. And you can use these questions if you want to. You can say, hey, Joseph and Claire, I want to use my own questions. Thank you very much. But I do want to use your maps. So you can devise your own questions, being the creative educators that you are. And one of the things that's in that lesson is a wonderful data set on, for example, here, I'm going to turn this on. And now I've got, what do I have at my fingertips? I have erosion susceptibility. Okay. And so I've got all of the, in this case, there's the erosion susceptibility. In this top layer here, what do I have? I have the erosion. I'm doing a filter. I want to find every place in New Zealand, according to this data set, where the erosion susceptibility is high. So I've just run a little, as you can probably even tell from the back of the room, I've got a little expression that I'm building there. So I'm building a little bit of skills in students. It's a little bit of math. It's an expression. It's a mathematical expression. ESC, erosion susceptibility, is high. Apply. Okay, now what kind of patterns do I see, and why do those patterns exist? Another set of lessons at your fingertips is something called the geo-inquiries. So I mentioned the lessons that Claire at Eagle Technology has created. Our team here in the USA have created, in conjunction with fine teachers like yourselves, geo-inquiries on earth science, environmental science, and other things that you've got. These are all 2 pages long, and they are all tied, once again, to a live interactive web map. So continuing the theme that we were talking about before, here is the cracked plates lesson. Again, if you printed this, which would be front and back, but notice here, the URL is a web map. And most of these actually are not requiring any sign-in. So you've got the bells ringing in 5 minutes. The students are arriving. I want to look at some of this content here, and I want to look at it right now. Thank you very much. Or the students are arriving in my Zoom session if you're teaching online, etc. So you've got a no shortage of data at your fingertips here, including, in this case, relative motion of plate boundaries. Fascinating. Okay, why should we care that there's a subduction zone running to the north and east of you all? Why does that matter? What's where, why is it there, and why should we care? So that's a series of geo-inquiries that you're welcome to use as well. And the other thing that I want to just lay out there is I have a series of things that I just wanted to say right at the end here as we sort of go with closing moments. Let the students fly, okay? Give them some structure with this, but don't micromanage their inquiry in geotechnologies, because it is one of the appeals is that it's an inquiry-based tool. So if they're looking at earthquakes over in South America and you really want them to focus on New Zealand, you can get them back to New Zealand at some point. But give them a little bit of freedom to do some inquiry. Your role is still important. Your role is still critical because you're framing the inquiry questions. You're giving them the vocabulary to think about clustered points and lines versus random or scattered, right? You're giving them the vocabulary there so they can start articulating the patterns and the relationships that they see, okay? So being curious, I think, is the most important part of this. Asking questions about the world. And that's, again, where your role is critically important here. Now, I've only got about 5 minutes left, so close with this inquiry process. And that is asking questions, investigating, exploring the data, analyzing it. And much of the data nowadays is spatial. It's delivered in live interactive web maps. Hence, geotechnology is a viable tool to move forward with. And the last thing is, we've used a lot of different data sets here today, right? Be critical of data and being able to work with it, I think, is a key skill for your students in the 21st century. No surprise to you all, right? You knew I was probably going to say something like that. I have a whole series of short teachable moment essays about being critical of data. And I'm going to put it in the chat box here. It's called the Spatial Reserves data blog. Spatial Reserves. What I'm getting at here, folks, is that I don't want students to just say, oh, I've got a web map and therefore I trust it 100%, right? Maps are representations of reality. I don't want students to believe everything they see on the web, and neither do you. I don't want them to believe every single map that they see on the web, and neither do you. Anybody can create maps and share them nowadays, including you, your students, and the whole global community. So being critical of data, even if it looks authoritative, maps have traditionally looked very authoritative, and we tended to believe them. And nowadays, I want people to be critical of mapped data. So this whole Spatial Reserves blog is about three things. Where do I find spatial data to use in the classroom, Joseph? And secondly, how do I know if it's any good? How do I know if I can trust it? And third, societal and ethical issues around mapping. Maps are very powerful means of communication. Treat them with respect, be thoughtful about them. And so the ethical implications include, how do I symbolize? How do I classify the data? What symbols do I use? What colors do I use? What map projection do I use? And related to that also is location privacy. Do you have a fitness app? Do you share all your walks and runs? If you did, would it matter? So location privacy, as these tools become increasingly accurate and also very personal in nature, I want students to be critical of mapped data and think thoughtfully about when they're making these maps. So that's what that essay is all about. And again, we've got 2 minutes now. Sorry about that, folks. But let me scroll down a little bit so you remember, my name and how to get a hold of me. But more importantly, I want to hear from you. What's your reaction to that, folks? Is that the most boring, horrible thing ever, or were there some little geo nuggets to take away? Oh, well, that's very kind, folks. Let me know if I can be of help to you. This is a journey. You're not going to learn all of geotechnologies in one 45-minute period. But I hope this has been intriguing enough where you can say, you know what? I'm going to pursue that. And maybe next semester, or maybe this semester, I'm going to use 1 or 2 of those tools. And maybe next semester, I'm going to use 3 or 4 of those tools. And so it's a journey going forward. And I don't mean the 80s band journey. I mean your geotechnology journey.
Thanks, Joseph. We're just sorting out how we can access all your resources. So we're real keen. We'll put our emails down for us.
Joseph, we're just getting everyone's email contact so we can then send those details to the participants. Okay.
And really, that very first story map that I shared has every single thing in it that I shared today. Okay, I just had different tabs open. But if you just have that one story map, that will be the launching point for your future exploration. All right, folks, I wish you all the best. Have a great conference. I wish I could be there in person because I love New Zealand. What's not to love? Anyway, Kia ora, and
Joseph,
great to see all of you.
Thank you very much for that. Really appreciate that. You can go and do your barbecuing now.
Yeah, right. You're so funny. Oh, my gosh. All right, folks, take care. Yep, all the best.
Thank you so
Map
much.
on.